back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and I thought I'd make a quick video about some rules just in the game in general. I get a lot of comments in my videos over and over again. I see a lot of the same ones where people think that the things that I'm saying don't necessarily work because the interactions don't fit with the rules. And they do, and of course I can't answer all the comments. I try to do as much as I can, but I thought I would just make a quick video about it to clarify some rules in the game that are very pertinent in the Commander format for newer players, or maybe people that have been playing for a while and don't actually know how things work. I know for me, they do change the rules all the time, so there even are some things that I get wrong. For example, auras, the rules have changed on that quite a bit, so when you're casting an aura, you are targeting the creature that you're casting it on, whether it be yours or your opponent's. But then if you blink an aura with something and it comes back into play, it's not targeting, it just slides right on there. So really weird ruling with auras, for example. They have changed it quite a bit, but in particular, some rules questions that I get all the time that people are confused about, I will go over. So I mentioned recently in a video I did about tokens dying or going to the graveyard, right? I've mentioned cards a lot like Viridian Revel or cards like Agent of the Iron Throne, which recently came out in Battle for Baldur's Gate, cards that are really, really great against token strategies. And the response that I get from a lot of people is, yeah, but tokens aren't actually going to the graveyard. Yes, they are. When a token dies, whether it be a treasure token or a creature token of any kind, it will go to the graveyard first. Whatever zone it's going to, for that matter, it will hit the zone first, and then it will cease to exist, right? Now, another important thing to note here is the term dies, which again, they never used to have it in the game. They brought it in recently, at least recently for me. Dies translates precisely to battlefield to graveyard, right? That's what dies means. When something dies, it goes from the battlefield to the graveyard. So that means it is hitting the graveyard. Now, of course, the term dies is only used for creatures. Doesn't really make a lot of sense with like treasure tokens, for example. Nevertheless, tokens, when they die or when they get destroyed or when they get sacrificed, will hit the graveyard. If that permanent type would normally hit the graveyard, tokens do as well. So you will get dies triggers, you will get when this goes to the graveyard triggers, all that kind of stuff. So that is very important when evaluating cards in the format, obviously. Another one I've gotten recently is copying or clone effects, let's say, and I'll talk about Cursed Mirror here, because that is the one that I specifically mentioned recently in my Boros Staples video that I had a couple people say doesn't work like I think it works, and it does. So Cursed Mirror is 2 and a red artifact. You tap it to add a red. As Cursed Mirror enters the battlefield, you may have it become a copy of any creature on the battlefield until end of turn, except it has haste. So what I said in the video is this card's so great because you can copy your opponent's creatures, like say an Eternal Witness, and get the ETB effect. And I had a lot of people say, yeah, but your Cursed Mirror is already on the battlefield, so you're not going to get that enter the battlefield. Yes, but you do. The important wording here is as Cursed Mirror enters the battlefield, right? If you look at Eternal Witness, it says when it enters the battlefield. That is the important distinction here. So Eternal Witness will trigger when it actually hits the battlefield. As is not a triggered ability, which I will get to. As means before it hits the battlefield, right? So it is going to copy the Eternal Witness before it actually is on the battlefield, so it will get the triggered ability of whatever creature that you are copying. So you got to be careful there with the wording when it comes to stuff like that. This is the most complicated game on the planet. There's a lot of little nuances, and you always have to check for stuff like that. I will actually read the rulings here. Any enters the battlefield abilities of the copied creature will trigger when Cursed Mirror enters the battlefield. Any as this creature enters the battlefield or this creature enters the battlefield with abilities of the copied creature will also work, which also means that if the creature enters the battlefield with counters on it, you will get those counters as well on your Cursed Mirror. I don't know why you would want them on there. Nevertheless, they would be there. So that important distinction between as and when makes a big difference, which leads me to the last ruling I'm going to be talking about here, which is abilities in general. I'll start with triggered abilities, right? And again, as I've mentioned on my channel many times before, triggered abilities you always can identify by whenever, when, or at. Those 3 words at the beginning of the ability means that they are a triggered ability. As is not one of those, right? That's how you know that Cursed Mirror is not a triggered ability, because as is not a triggered ability. Whenever, when, or at. Those are the 3 words you want to be looking for with triggered abilities. Whenever you are copying triggered abilities with a Strionic Resonator or maybe a Harmonic Prodigy, one of my favorite cards, that's the wording that you are looking for, right? If your commander has a triggered ability, it's going to be using when, whenever, or at, and you can copy it with one of those effects. You can also stifle it with a stifle effect, or any other card that counters triggered abilities, right? So that is the distinction there. And then of course you also have activated abilities. An activated ability you can identify very easily with a colon. There is always going to be a colon with an activated ability. The colon separates the activation cost with the effect. So anything before the colon, and again, this is a very important distinction, is part of the activation. That's the cost you have to pay in order to put that ability on the stack, and then the effect is what happens upon resolution. So again, getting back to Mangara of Karondor, a very important distinction there when I talked about this guy on my Underwhelming Commanders video is where the colon lies in his ability, right? Tap, colon, exile Mangara of Karondor and target permanent. So the activation there is the tap ability, that's all. Exiling Mangara is part of the resolution. So you can activate your Mangara, the ability goes on the stack, and then you can bounce your Mangara to your hand or blink it or do something else with it so that when the ability resolves, your Mangara will not get exiled. Only the other permanent will. If you look at another one of my personal favorites, Carrionet, it has a similar effect, right? 1 and a black skeleton 1/1. Pay 2 black, colon, exile Carrionet and target creature unless that creature's controller pays 2. Activate only if Carrionet is in your graveyard. So if Carrionet is in your graveyard, you can activate this ability, but exiling your Carrionet from your graveyard is part of the resolution. So again, you can pay the 2 black, and then return your Carrionet at instant speed from your graveyard to your hand so that when the ability resolves, your Carrionet is no longer there and it will not get exiled from your graveyard. Another thing you can do is activate the ability more than once, right? You can activate the ability if your opponent actually has the 2 to pay, and then you just activate it again before the ability resolves, before your Carrionet is exiled from your graveyard. So now they can't pay it and their creature gets exiled, right? So where that colon lies is very, very important to how the ability will work. And I will also throw out the other kind of ability that your stuff can have, which is a static ability, okay? So any keyword abilities like First Strike, Haste, those are all abilities that are just static abilities. There is no activation, there is no trigger, they're just turned on all the time. And they also don't use the stack, right? Any static ability doesn't use the stack, and if something doesn't use the stack, you can't respond to it, which is very, very important, right? If you look at a card like Elesh Norn, Grand Cenobite, other creatures you control get +2/+2, but of course the part that people hate, creatures your opponents control get -2/-2. That is a static ability, it's turned on all the time, it doesn't use the stack, you cannot respond to it, right? So if your opponent puts an Elesh Norn into play via a Court of Calling or something like that, bam, there it is, you didn't see it coming, you have no time to respond in any way, you can't sacrifice all your little token creatures to some effect, they're just gone. If you have a Sakura Tribe Elder in play and you want to sacrifice it in response to go get a land, sorry, you can't. That Elesh Norn is already on the battlefield. That static ability uses state-based effects, so you have no chance to respond to what is happening. Everything on the battlefield that has a toughness of 2 or less that your opponents control just instantly dies. So there you go. You got triggered abilities, you got activated abilities, you got static abilities. That pretty much covers everything. Just a quick video on some rules clarifications. I know I have a lot of newer viewers that watch my channel, whether you be new to the Commander format or just new to Magic in general, which is great. I like to get into these things. I love talking about the technicalities of the game. I think it's one of the most interesting and complicated games in existence. Actually, you know what? It is the most interesting and complicated game on the planet, I think. That's just my opinion. Making a quick video about how some of these rules interactions work, I think is important. Again, you have to know how your commander's abilities work, how the cards you're putting in your deck, whether or not they will actually work with your commander. Those interactions are really important to deck building. So I thought it was very relevant for me to make a video like this. But that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.